Hi, this is Joanne coming to you again from Quarantine 2020. And today, our workshop hopefully will be short. I want to teach you the nitty-gritty stuff of using the primary resources. By the end of this video, you should know what the Vatican website holds and why you would use it. Most importantly, you will know how to use the Catechism and a little bit of the history behind it and how it's set up and why it's set up that way, so that if there's a question, you know where to go, how to read it, and you will also know the sites to look up, say the number, so you can cut and paste things into your parent letters. Get ready to go to the Vatican's website. If I were in a classroom, I would have this as my homepage. It's mycatholic.com, and you can it has current events. Obviously, this is for older students. So we're going to find the Vatican's webpage at www.vatican.va. VA is important. Okay, it's not org or com, it's VA. We go there, and obviously the first thing we're going to want to do is translate it into English. All right. English. This is a little bit of an education on the levels of documents that exist. We have Angelus, or the Regina Caeli, on Wednesdays. The Holy Father gives a little talk after the Angelus. Many of you know Theology of the Body, for instance, was 180-something Angelus addresses put together into one to make Pope John Paul II what we call Theology of the Body. Then we have different levels of documents. We have apostolic constitutions, exhortations, letters, encyclicals, and then we have other things that happen at different levels. We have daily meditations, yada yada. We have other topics. Old Youth Day, if you're interested in that, I see that down there. Libraries, museums. I know there are lots of really great pictures if you're interested in the art history. But what I want to point out right now is the great search tool that exists. Go into the search tool, and what I would do is, when you're teaching high school, you will want, if they're doing any kind of research, to see if there is a Catholic perspective on that research. And when we want to look for the Catholic perspective, we want, of course, the official statements, not secondary or sources of what someone else says the church says. We want to look for the primary, what the church actual says. So let's just try capital punishment. Say someone was doing a research paper on capital punishment. Lots of information out there, but what does the church actually say? So we search it, and we wait. And here are the documents throughout history that can be great primary resources as reference. It is obviously split up by what was said when by the Pope, what kind of documents it's in, and we could go on Declaration of the Holy See to the First World Congress on the death penalty. We could, so there's lots of primary resources that Google won't show you, but is right here for person's research project. The Catechism of the Catholic Church then was published for the first time in the early 1990s. As a few years went on, truth doesn't change, remember that, but as a few years went on, some clarifications needed to be made, or distinctions needed to be made within the Catechism. So they republished another edition. In the cover sometimes looks like this. The changes were put in the back as like an addendum. Just this year, Pope Francis, and under his tenure, some more clarifications were made specifically on the environment. And so now if you were to look up the most current catechism on the bookshelf as of May 2020, the cover would be blue. When you go online at any of these sources, you will have the updated version. The changes that are made in each one are really minimal. There are no new teachings, as we know there cannot be, but just further clarifications on how to communicate truth to the current culture. The Catechism of the Catholic Church is split into 4 sections: the Creed, the celebration of the Christian mystery, life in Christ, and prayer. The Creed goes through the content, the matter of the faith, the creed. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. And so it takes it word by word. What does I mean? What does that mean? So what is man? It starts off with that. The second section is the liturgy, the celebration. This is the sacraments. It goes through all of the sacraments, what each element of the sacrament means, our liturgy. That's that section. Section 3, life in Christ, is the one we will spend the most time on. It is how we live out our life in Christ. Most of the social justice principles are here. It will cover the commandments, and you will find all the economic principles, the government relationships, how we live it out individually and collectively. And then the fourth section is prayer. All right, here is a picture in the Catechism of the Catholic Church in the book. As you can see, I'm in part 3, which is life in Christ. Life in Christ, again, deals with human beings' actions and all that entails. I chose this. It's a complicated page, but it kind of has everything that I want to show you on it. So we're at the beginning of chapter 2, the human community. We do not refer to page numbers. We refer that when you see here is the number 1870. Actually, I can't see it because it's small. 1877. So we refer to paragraph numbers, not page numbers, when we're speaking about the catechism or even church documents, really. You'll notice down there in the references to church documents, they refer to paragraph numbers. Over to the right here is the cross-reference. So if you're teaching students how to use primary sources in a paper and to find primary source church quotes, a good cheating way is 3 different ways. Look at the cross-reference, because if they go to this paragraph over here, they will find another quote saying almost the same thing. These are cross-references saying almost the same thing, yet in another context or whatever. Another way of finding extra sources is to look at the footnotes, and there you will find a church document, which can also serve as another resource. So this over here is important. It is at the end of each chapter. So obviously this is the end of chapter 1. And what it is it is the in brief. It summarizes everything briefly, what just went beforehand. So while you might want to look at, oh, there we go. You might want to look at everything that it says in the chapter. You follow the in briefs. It will summarize it more succinctly. Participation in social life, authority, all these topics. I chose this because it really, the common good, it is everything that we're speaking about in Catholic social teaching. Again, not in the order of the USCCB, but it has all the elements there and goes even deeper. Responsibility, participation, again, the in brief section. So this is just briefly how to use the book itself. So if we were to get together in a professional development day, this would be a great opportunity to put you in groups with one of my favoritist activities. I've done this activity with juniors and seniors, as well as in college, at a community college for nursing students, and then at Brescia with just a bunch of 20-year-olds. The activity, I always run a risk because I have a goal that they're going to come up with the answer that I want them to come up with, and inevitably it has not failed yet. So I would put everyone in this professional development seminar into a group, and I would have them decide, pretend you have been married for 10 years. And at that time, you realize that you've made certain promises to each other that you really have the expectation that you will uphold. Not the marriage vows that are broader. I'm talking about specific promises. What would those promises be? For instance, a common one would be, you don't spend a lot of money without talking to me first. Those kinds of things. All right? So then I let everyone go into this activity. I won't go into the kinds of answers that are different between the men and the women, but inevitably, a lot of them come up with the same answers. And that is going to be my whole point on how the catechism is structured. The following are examples of what most groups come up with in one form or another. So in another video, the first one in the introduction, I reiterated over and over how everything in theology is about relationship. God is a relationship in the Trinity. He created us to desire and to be in relationship with ourselves, with others, and with Him. He has hardwired us for that. And everything in the faith falls under the idea of relationship. And relationships tend to be the same, as found in this activity. Marriages and our expectations of others usually fall into the same categories. And if I could, if I had a chalkboard or a whiteboard right now, I would start drawing lines from every promise and expectation you have of someone in your relationship, and then I would draw a line to the commandments. Each of the commandments is an illustration of the basics of a relationship following the natural law. So I will not give my heart to another. You shall not have strange gods before me. Date night. Keep holy the Lord's Sabbath. Remember the days and the anniversary. Accept my family as they are. Take care of them. Honor your father and mother. Everything ties to the commandments. All right. That is important in understanding how the Catechism is set up, especially section 3, because it's all about how we act in our relationships. The beginning of section 3 in the Catechism gives the general principles of Catholic social teaching and society and virtue. Then the commandments, okay? All of our actions somehow fall into these categories. So you can find the Catechism of the Catholic Church in so many places. The USCCB's Catechism, I don't like it because it just takes pictures of the page. You can have a search engine, but it's not as good. Currently, in the making of this video in May of 2020, I have been using this particular site, St. Charles Borromeo Catholic Church, for my catechism searches because it spells it out. And the reason why this is important is you will be wanting to eventually go ahead and copy the link from this in your parent letters. So as we know, the first part of the Catechism of the Catholic Church talks about what we believe. In many of your questions, there's a basic question about the understanding of man, okay, and how God made man and the Catholic view of what man is. And that's in the very beginning. Why God created man, how God created man with a desire. We're religious beings. So you will find a lot of quotes from the very beginning because in the creed, it starts with I believe. And so the first section is I and we. Okay, we're going to get into belief next, but we as man, our capacity and what we can do. But moving on, that's in the very beginning. As we know, we look at catechism by paragraph number. These are the paragraph numbers. So we're going to skip through the creed. We're going to skip through the liturgy, the sacraments. Obviously, you could go back to those on your own. We are more interested, most of our things come from section 3, Life in Christ. And that begins somewhere around, okay, yeah, here it is. Part 3, Life in Christ. And it starts off generally Okay, again, about man, what we're called to. We're all built with a desire for happiness. We're all called to union. What does freedom mean? In the economy of salvation, how does freedom play with God's permissible will? We judge the morality of an action, the role of the emotions in it, formation of conscience. It goes over all these things. One of the things that is important is you will be in some of your classes be dealing with specific, these are general things, social justice, with specific things. So I think the most prevalent commandment that we deal with is the fourth commandment because it talks about families. But as we know, communities, and we teach in the primary grades, communities are families. Nations are families. Our relationship to authority all comes under the fourth commandment, honor thy father and mother. Talks about the role of families and authorities, how we respond to authority and how authority should respond to us. If we clicked on that, duties of citizens, here you will find some principles, obviously, that in the Catholic social teaching, refusing obedience, armed resistance to oppression. Armed resistance to oppression is like the just war theory, but when America intervenes, so to speak, in another country's problems, and this happens a lot. And in social studies, if something is happening and the question comes up, should America respond to this? Well, then we would look at the situation. Of course, none of us really knows what's going on in the situation. The intelligence community does not tell us things, but we have to go through all the conditions. Okay, this is a great exercise. I've done it with 7th and 8th graders because they have to go home and talk to their parents about it. And again, I believe in educating parents too. So, armed resistance to oppression is when one nation, one family, intervenes in the trouble of another family. On a personal note, I use this in the just war theory to know whether I should intervene into someone else's problems. Is there a certain grave and prolonged violation of fundamental rights? Have I tried other things, different things? Is my intervention going to provoke worse disorders? Do I see a hope of success? Is it impossible reasonably to foresee any other solution rather than safe direct involvement? So anyway, that's just personal. What you probably didn't even want to know about. So we go back here, and in the fourth commandment, that's important. When we get into the fifth commandment is obviously life issues. Sixth commandment, sexuality. Important here is the seventh commandment in social studies. You will come here a lot for all economic issues because the seventh commandment is you shall not steal. So it has to deal with everything that deals with property. Property could be creation, so economic activity of just wages, treatment of the poor, respect for persons and their goods. The universal destination of goods and private ownership of goods is kind of an interesting concept that church documents have spent a lot of time on. We have a right to private ownership of goods, but when it all comes down to it, before that, everything still belongs to everyone. And that distinction is discussed there. So, did we reach the goal of this particular video? Do you realize the importance of using church primary resources, not secondary, in your parent letters and your personal research? And do you realize the importance of teaching students, forming their consciences to use actual church statements in personal and academic research? And for this workshop, did you meet our learner objectives? So do you know which website to go to find the Catholic primary resources and where to do your searches for the Catholic primary resources? Do you know the basic setup now of the Catechism of the Catholic Church and how to find something that has CCC and then a number? Do you know the options for cutting and pasting links for the Catechism or the church documents into parent letters? And if you have a question in your class regarding the rightness or wrongness of an action, do you know which section to find church statements in the Catechism on principles that to guide our actions. And lastly, did you know that you can contact me with any questions you have regarding an issue, and that I would find it delightful to have a discussion and to find where we can find the resources to address your needs, or having me come into your classroom and explain something or do whatever. I would find it a joy to do. So please feel free to contact me for anything.